So a classic spot when it comes to trout fishing is a gravel shelf. But it's not a classic just shelving riffle. It's a shelf with a whole series of fingers. So what that means is the tail out of the run above flattens out. The whole river is sliding into this trough right below us. But as you look upstream, you see tiny little white fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the main. And each one has possibility of the fish. You'd think that all the fish are in the heart of it. No, sir. The fish will be, a couple of them will be looking for stonefly nymphs and mayfly nymphs in each one of the fingers. And they're shallow. And I mean, they could be anywhere from 5 inches, fish just nosed in looking for nymphs and swinging back and forth in the current, to maybe waist deep. The kick when you come across this situation is that you can't fish at all. And if there's fish a little bit deeper, well, you have to start shallow and work your way out. So what we're going to do, again, we've got a 20-inch dropper to a little pheasant tail nymph under a dry fly. We're just going to focus on the first probably 10 to 15 feet off that shelf out. And all we're looking for is those fish that are up, feeding on nymphs, kind of swaying back and forth in the current in those fingers. And we're only going to focus on essentially from about, 8 inches of depth to about waist deep, and then we're going to cast it again. It's just methodically work my way up along that drop-off shelf zone, just focusing on fishing the shallow water. So we're in an early emergence of a mayfly hatch, and what that means is that we know this week there's been a lot of mayfly activity, and they've been PMDs and blue-winged olives, which the nymphs come out of the rocks and gravel. And the hatch hasn't started for us yet today, but we know it's going to. So what we're doing is just coming off the big pool or deeper run, and the fish are going to nose into that drop down shelf looking for the nymphs just before the hatch gets going. So we're talking about riffled water. We're talking about water that's probably thigh deep or less, which on me is about 2.5 feet. And we're going to be fishing not so much dry flies, but I am going to run a little polywing stonefly pattern. There's a few smaller stoneflies out, but that's not my focus on this kind of a cool day. That's really just going to act as my indicator. And again, these fish are somewhat active, so I've got about 20 inches down. I've got a little size 16, essentially some kind of a pheasant tail nymph with a little sparkle in the tail, and that's just because of the low light that we're in. And what that's going to do is hopefully act like a little bubble or some kind of emerging thing when the nymphs ride up. Just a little imitator flash to get the fish's attention.
I slid in further upstream than I normally would because I sighted the lower part of the run and saw no trout in my target depth zone. On this side of the river, the prime shallower water was at the head of the run gravel shelf, so I focused on systematically casting into the head of each finger along the shelf, working from left to right, then further into the main trough, and then moved upstream. And for expediency of example, we had sighted a gorgeous brown actively feeding on nymphs that were likely free drifting just prior to the hatch in the main trough at the base of one of the incoming fingers, and definitely anticipated hooking up, which we thankfully did.
How's that?
It's good? Yeah!
Of course, that was just that side of the river. Afterward, I walked downstream, crossed at the tail out, and worked the fingers of the shelf across the river systematically as well.